Sawadee-kap. Hello and welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha. Today is our group learning program, and we're going to be studying chapter 5 of this book, Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment. This chapter is titled The Eightfold Path, the path for all humans to enlightenment. This is the core central teaching of the Buddha, and in order to get to enlightenment, you would need to know this teaching inside and out, backwards and forwards. So after our meditation, we're going to go walking through that thoroughly. We've already done that at the beginning of the group learning program in 3 separate classes, but now we're going to do it just in one class because we've already covered it before, but we're still going to get into it in a pretty deep level, but we're going to kind of stay a little bit higher level than we have in the past. So for those of you guys that have studied this before, this will be a refresher for you because you're going to need to revisit it more than one time. And for those of you guys that haven't learned the Eightfold Path with me using the original words of the Buddha, this will be a great opportunity for you to dive into this core central teaching of the Buddha, because this is what's going to help to improve the condition of your mind in the condition of your life. So welcome to all of you, whether you're joining for the first time or you're joining regularly. I'd like to invite you to join for meditation. That's how we start each one of our classes. I'm going to start this with some chanting to ease us into meditation. You're going to hear me coming in with some guidance to guide you during the meditation. Then there'll be a period of time where it's just quiet and we're all meditating together. Then we'll come out of the meditation with some chanting. So if you'd like to join along, you might take a position of seated, lying, or standing. There's also a walking position, but it doesn't really work so well with online learning. And if you'd like to join along in these chants, you're more than welcome to. And as I mentioned, after the chanting, I'll come back in with some guidance to help you. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Bhutang Bhagavanhang Abhivateyami Savakato Bhagavata Tammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Bhagavato Sāvaka Saṅkho Saṅghang Namami Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso Bhagava Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vicacaranang Sammuno Sakhato Rokavitu Anutero Purisa Dhamma Sati Satatawa Manusarang Bhoto Bhagavati. Okay, with the lower body and hands and arms comfortable, and the upper body erect. Just close the eyes and start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Here you're just looking to establish the breath. A nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. Not forced or controlled, just a gradual inhale through the nose, experiencing the full breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. Your breath may not match up with the guidance that I'm providing, and that's okay. This is your practice. I'm just here for guidance. You can use this voice as a reminder that whenever you get to the next inhale, breathing gradually through the nose, developing a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose, experiencing the full breath. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the breath well established, start fixating the mind on the breath, either the sound of the breath coming into the nose or the sensation of air moving over the skin into the nose. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the mind fixated on the breath, whenever you notice that it moves off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. No need to observe the thought, label it, judge it, analyze it, or even try to figure out where it's coming from. Whenever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. I'm going to be quiet now and let you do this work of focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. You have nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. No one needs you right now. This is your time to focus on the breath. Breathing in and out. อะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธภะคะวาพุทธังภะคะวันตังอะภิวาเทมิสวากขาโตมหะคะวะตาธัมโมธัมมังนามัสสามิสุปฏิปันโนภะคะวะโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามินะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสภะคะวะอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิจาจารณังสัมมุโนสกขาโตโรกาวิตุอนุเตโรปุริสาดัมมาสติสัตตาตาวามนุสนังโอโตภาควาติ Okay, if you guys would like to slowly make your way out of meditation. Again, I'd like to welcome all of you guys to our class today. Welcome to the group learning program. Today we're going to be discussing chapter 5, which is titled The Eightfold Path, the path for all humans to enlightenment. This is chapter 5 of our book, Developing a Life Practice, the Path That Leads to Enlightenment. And this is the core central teaching of the Buddha. This is what you're going to need to know inside and out, backwards and forwards. You're going to need to commit this to your memory at some point in order to be able to make your way to enlightenment. This may be your first time learning the Eightfold Path with me using the words of the Buddha, and that's a great time to really listen with eager ears. This is what the Buddha teaches you, is that whenever you're learning his teachings, that you listen with eager ears. This is like actively listening to understand his teachings. Because what I'm going to be sharing with you today, it's not anything that you should believe. There's no belief in his teachings. You would like to learn, examine, and investigate his teachings. You would then like to reflect on those teachings to independently verify whether they're true or they're false. And then you would like to practice those teachings, integrating them into your life. And what you're doing with this Eightfold Path is it's these 8 individual factors that you're dialing in closer and closer. And that's what your practice is. When we talk about developing a life practice, this is your life practice. And just like if you had a speaker system and you were interested in tweaking these 8 dials to get a better and better quality sound out of your speakers, it's the same thing with the Eightfold Path, is that you can tweak each one of these factors and you're going to get a better and better performing mind. If you think back to when I taught chapter 3 about what is enlightenment, I explained how enlightenment is where the mind is peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. The mind no longer experiences any discontent feelings. So all the feelings such as anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, and boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy, All of these and others are completely eliminated from the mind by training it using the Eightfold Path. This is a practice that you can practice on a daily basis, every single moment, where you're actually fine-tuning the mind. And not only will you eliminate discontent feelings, but you'll notice that the mind's focused, has concentration, clarity, and deep memory. And you'll notice your personal, professional relationships are really blossoming, that you're not experiencing bitterness and harshness and hostility in your relationships any longer. You can conduct your relationships with ease. Right now, you probably find that to be difficult. There's probably certain relationships that you're struggling in, or you're challenged at least in those relationships. And that's just because the mind lacks the wisdom of this Eightfold Path and it hasn't been trained to uproot the pollutions in the mind. The Buddha discovered these 10 individual pollutions in the mind. They're called the 10 fetters. And then he figured out how to actually eradicate them. And he shared the tools and techniques of how to eradicate these from your own mind. And it's the Eightfold Path that's going to do that for you. So as you're learning today, you'll be able to learn each one of these factors: right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. We're going to use the words of the Buddha so that you guys can see what he taught, and then you don't believe it. You'll be able to learn it, examine it, investigate it, reflect on it through your own direct experience, your experiences in life, and see if what is being described is true. And then you can start integrating this into your life and practicing it, so that that's where you'll see the real results, through practicing of the teachings. And as you have probably seen through studying the teachings of the Buddha to any point in time that you've been studying them, either with me or somewhere else, you can see that they're independently verifiable, that there's no belief in these teachings, because with belief, you don't know what's true or false. You're just believing it. So you need to be able to get to that wisdom. This Eightfold Path is organized into 3 sections: wisdom, moral conduct, and mental discipline. And I'm going to be pausing at different times, opening up for questions to be sure you guys have an opportunity to ask clarifying questions. So as I walk you through this, you're going to see that all of these factors are actually working together. You're not mastering one before you move on to the next. You're actually dialing all of these in at the same time. And this starts with right view. Right view, the way that the Buddha teaches it in the Eightfold Path, is this. He says, "In what, monks, is right view? It is, monks, the wisdom of discontentedness, the wisdom of the cause of discontentedness, the wisdom of the elimination of discontentedness, and the wisdom of the way of practice leading to the elimination of discontentedness. This is called right view." So what he's doing here in the Eightfold Path is he's pointing to another teaching, and he's saying that's right view. What he's pointing to is what's called the Four Noble Truths. And this is something I taught last week. Underneath of this line here, I've got the top section of the Four Noble Truths, where the Buddha teaches the Four Noble Truths, just so that you can gain the confidence that what he's pointing to here in the Eightfold Path is the Four Noble Truths. You can see this connection. What the Four Noble Truths are doing for you is it's explaining the problem in the mind, the cause of the problem, the elimination of it, and the path forward of how to completely eliminate the problem. And you learn this through the words of the Buddha. And I walked students through this last week. But just as a little bit of a refresher, we first talked about the 3 universal truths, and then we taught the 4 noble truths. And they're called truths because the Buddha knows that they're true. I know that they're true, and other people know that they're true, but you need to be able to know that they're true. Where we talked about the universal truth of impermanence, understanding that everything around you that is a conditioned object, it is impermanent, meaning it is not permanent, that it arises, it changes, and it fades away. That anything you see, hear, smell, taste, that comes in contact with the body, or any thoughts or ideas that go through the mind are constantly changing. And this is very important because the Buddha is not explaining to you the way the world should be, with rules and commandments. He's not giving you rites or rituals and ceremonies and worship and things like this. He's helping you to understand the wisdom of how the world is constructed. He's explaining to you the natural laws of existence, because what you guys are going to hear in a moment is that the mind craves permanence in the unenlightened state. And as long as it's craving permanence, but it's living in an impermanent world, then you're going to keep struggling because the mind's going to keep wanting this permanence, but yet it lives in an impermanent world. And I gave you different ways to be able to independently verify this, that you look around the world and try to determine whether things around you are actually impermanent. Like you're body or your bank accounts or your relationships or the weather. You can look at all these things around you and you can see that indeed this is a universal truth. I walked people through and kind of showing you how to learn, reflect, and practice to be able to independently verify this. Then we talked about the universal truth of discontentedness. This is describing what the unenlightened mind is experiencing, which are conditioned feelings. That there's these pleasant feelings, painful feelings, and neither painful nor pleasant, like happiness, excitement, elation, thrill, exhilaration, euphoria, or the painful feelings like sadness, anger, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, or the neither painful nor pleasant feelings like shyness or uncomfortableness. I have boredom and loneliness here, but some people say that's quite painful, so you could put that into the painful category. But what the Buddha is explaining is that the unenlightened mind experiences conditioned feelings. Based on some condition, the mind will experience happiness. So if it's sunny outside, then the mind will get happy or excited. But because that's a conditioned feeling, it's based on some condition that when that condition changes, and it will change because it's impermanent, the sun is not permanent. When it changes to something else like rain or something like that, you might be angry or frustrated or irritated or annoyed. This is what the unenlightened mind is doing, is it's forming its inner feelings based on some condition. And it's the Four Noble Truths that's going to explain to you what that is. But here in the three universal truths, the Buddha is just explaining that the universal truth of discontentedness, the unenlightened mind, is experiencing this up and down and up and down and up and down. And this is the actual problem that the mind is experiencing. But there's a solution for this that we'll get to as we get going in our class today. Then I taught you the universal truth of non-self, explaining how the mind clings to this self-image and it clings to the self-identity in the mind, the body in the mind, and now it forms feelings based on that. Whereas if someone says, wow, you're so handsome, you're so beautiful, that shirt brings out the colors of your eyes, you're like, wow, they're talking about me, because they're commenting about this body. But then it's only a matter of time before someone says something negative and degrading and disparaging about this physical body. And now you'll be frustrated or agitated or annoyed. And that's because the mind's clinging to this body, wanting to be perceived by others in a certain way, thinking that this is who you are. Or you might be clinging to an identity, like I am American, or I am Canadian, or I am a Brit, I'm an Aussie, I am Brazilian, I am a Mexican, I am Lithuanian, I am Chinese. You might have all this I am in the mind. Any kind of I am around your culture, your ethnicity, your sexual orientation, your nationality, your job or occupation, any number of things. Your mind can cling to an identity. And once again, when you hear agreeable things, you'll be happy and excited. But when you hear disagreeable things related to those things that your mind's holding on to, then you'll experience the struggles and the difficulties with the anger and the sadness and the frustration. So the Buddha teaches you that there is no self, that this body isn't you, this mind isn't you, this isn't who you are. But there is a body and there is a mind that's come together for this existence, but this doesn't define who you are. So I walked you through all of these in a way that you could learn it, you could reflect on it to independently verify it, and you can practice it. Then I helped you understand this building block of craving, desire, attachment, how the mind has these wants and expectations, this longing, yearning, and chasing after the objects of your affection, pulling in the direction towards things, thinking that they're going to be satisfying and fulfilling. The mind thinks that the next new shiny object waiting around the corner is going to provide some lasting satisfaction. So the mind chases it and chases it and chases it and chases it. So the mind might think like, oh, I know what I need in order to be happy and experience a great life. I need a boyfriend or a girlfriend. So the mind might chase that for a while. And then you get it, you're happy for a period of time, and then the mind goes back to the sadness or frustration. Or the mind might chase after a new pair of shoes or jewelry or a new video game or a new phone. Or, oh, I know what I need. I need more money. That's what I need. That'll make everything better. Let me just chase after that. And now you might chase that for a while, you get more money, you're happy temporarily, but then the mind ends up right back in the sadness or frustration. Then it's like, oh, I know what I need, a bigger house. Let me chase that for a while. Or more friends, or a different job, or another car, or something like this. The mind has this longing, yearning. It's forming its inner feelings based on these cravings, desires, attachments. The mind is pulling towards something. It has wants and expectations. So this is a building block to help you understand the Four Noble Truths, which is what we walked through last week, where the first noble truth is explaining the problem, the second one is explaining the cause, the third one is explaining the elimination, and the fourth one is explaining the plan or the path forward of how to solve this. So the problem is that everyone that is unenlightened is experiencing discontentedness. That's the problem that you have, is that the mind is experiencing anger and sadness and frustration over and over and over and over and over again. And the cause of this problem, which is in the second noble truth, is the craving, desire, attachment, the wants, the expectations. The mind wants things to be permanent, when in reality it lives in an impermanent world. And that's where we talked about a boyfriend or girlfriend. When you come together with a new boyfriend or girlfriend, maybe you're so happy and excited. Someone's showing you affection, right? But now when you guys break up, now you're sad or frustrated or agitated, or you're lonely or bored, or you're missing this person. It's not the love that's causing that. It's the mind holding on and craving permanence. Or if you have a brand new car and it gets scratched, you might be frustrated or agitated or annoyed. This is because the mind is craving permanence. It's not the scratch, and it's not the person who caused the scratch. That's not what's causing the anger and the frustration to arise in the mind. It's the mind craving, longing, yearning, wanting things to be permanent, but yet we live in an impermanent world. So this second noble truth is explaining the cause of this problem. And this is where you can independently verify these, just like all the others. You can independently verify it by taking a situation where you've recently been angry or frustrated or agitated or annoyed, and you can see that your mind caused it itself, that there was something your mind wanted. And if you would have got that thing, you would have been so happy. But because you didn't get it, you got frustrated or agitated or annoyed. You can even think back to when we were a child, that when we wanted chocolate or ice cream from our mom and dad and they gave it to us, we were so happy and excited. Oh, we got chocolate and ice cream. But then when we asked mom and dad for chocolate and ice cream and they didn't give it to us, we were angry or frustrated. We were irritated and annoyed. And we thought it was mom and dad that was causing that. But in reality, it was our own mind, because we wanted this chocolate and ice cream. We were longing, yearning for it, and we wanted it our way. We didn't understand impermanence, that sometimes you're going to get chocolate and ice cream and sometimes not. That is impermanence. The mind is craving permanence. So you can independently verify this for yourself, that your own mind is causing these feelings. Because what the mind's going to do when it lacks wisdom of this second noble truth is it's going to push people away, or it's going to push the situation away. And you can see that this doesn't solve the problem, because you just keep getting irritated or annoyed over and over and over again. It's just a matter of time. If you push people out of your life and they were the real cause of your problem of discontentedness, then when you push them out of your life, you would be peaceful. You wouldn't experience annoyment or frustration anymore. But when you push those people and that situation out of your life, you still get frustrated, you still get annoyed. Or you might be bitter and harsh and hostile through your intentions, your speech, and your actions. And now those people might choose to leave out of your life. Or you might put your expectations on people and try to control them and force them to do things your way. And again, those people feel pressured and they might leave out of your life. So you can't live harmoniously with all beings as long as you're pushing people away, you're being bitter, harsh, and hostile, or you're putting your expectations on people. And this is just from a lack of wisdom of what's truly causing these feelings. The mind is perceiving it as something external. You might even feel justified in your anger and hostility towards this person, but it's just the mind's lack of wisdom. So there's a way to eliminate this from the mind. But first, you need to understand the cause. You wouldn't be able to eliminate your anger and frustration if you didn't understand the cause. So the cause of these feelings is the craving, the desire, the longing, the yearning, wanting things, chasing things, expecting things to be a certain way and wanting those to be permanent. And once you understand that that's the cause of the problem, then the elimination is so straightforward, which is in the third noble truth. The elimination of discontentedness is possible by eliminating cravings, desires, attachments. If you can eliminate the cravings, desires, attachments, since that's the cause, then you will eliminate the discontentedness. And the way that you eliminate your cravings, desires, attachments, the Buddha describes in the Fourth Noble Truth. The path to eliminating discontentedness is the Eightfold Path. That's the complete perfect plan that's going to show you how to eliminate your discontentedness. And you're building right view. You're establishing right view. That's the first place to start. Establishing right view is to understand that it's your own mind that's causing these feelings. If you had wrong view, you would be blaming others for the discontent feelings that you're experiencing. And as long as you're blaming others for the discontent feelings, you would never be able to solve it, because you'd have to go around the world and you'd have to train everybody to do things your way. That's not the way to get to peacefulness. You need to train your own mind. So if you have wrong view, you will tend to blame other people for the feelings that you're experiencing. But by establishing right view, by deeply penetrating the Four Noble Truths, you can see that it's your own mind, the craving, desire, attachment that's causing these feelings. And that's the foundational wisdom that you then build everything else on top of. Once you have right view and you've established that, and you're able to see very clearly that it's your own mind that's causing these discontent feelings, then you move on to right intention. Right intention, the Buddha says, in what, monks, is right intention? The intention of renunciation, the intention of non-ill will, the intention of harmlessness. This is called right intention. Some people refer to this as right thinking or right thoughts, because this is something that you're cultivating in the mind, where you have these three aspects that you're cultivating: the intention of renunciation, non-ill will, and harmlessness. What renunciation is where you have a willingness to let go and give up your unwholesomeness in your false beliefs, your false perceptions of reality, your misunderstandings, your confusions. There's certain beliefs that you have right now that are actually not true. That's the problem with belief, is that you don't know if it's true or not. You either were convinced to believe this by somebody else, or you convinced yourself to believe it. And now, because you're just believing it, you don't know the truth, and your mind can easily be shaken up. So you need to be willing to let go of certain unwholesome things that you're doing. There's certain unwholesome things that are unwise and that you're doing, and you need to be willing to let those go. If you weren't willing to let those go, you're never going to get to enlightenment. So that's why once you understand right view, that your mind is causing these feelings, the very next thing is, well, you need to be willing to let some things go. If you just held on to the things that you're currently doing and that you currently believe, you're not going to be able to experience enlightenment. There are certain things that you're holding on to that aren't serving you very well right now. One of the very first things that you need to let go of is the belief that other people are causing you to be angry. The belief that other people are causing you to be frustrated and agitated and annoyed. If you continue to hold on to that, there's no way you're going to be able to get to enlightenment. So you're not getting rid of your beliefs by bringing in new beliefs. That's not what you're doing on the path to enlightenment. You're bringing in wisdom. And when your wisdom that you're bringing in is conflicting with these false beliefs, you get rid of your beliefs. You move them aside and you're like, hey, I know the truth now. I've been believing all this time that other people are causing me to be angry. You might have been in arguments where you're adamantly fighting with people and trying to convince them that they are the ones who are making you angry. But when you see the truth and you have this wisdom, you get rid of these beliefs, and now you know the truth. So you're going to need to practice the intention of renunciation, where you're willing to let go of your false beliefs, your false perceptions of reality, your misunderstanding, your confusion, and your unwholesomeness. And you're going to need to be willing to let go of any kind of ill will or animosity or bitterness or anger, hatred, and ill will. Because the intention of non-ill will is to have the thinking or the thought or the intention of goodwill, where you're interested in seeing all beings be well. This genuine interest in seeing all beings be well. That's loving kindness. And then you have the intention of harmlessness, where you're disinterested or incapable of causing harm to other beings. Because any harm that you put out, it's just going to come back to you. So you're building up your wisdom section of the Eightfold Path with right view and right intention, realizing that this is what you need to be able to accomplish in order to build out the rest of the Eightfold Path. So just to summarize this before I open up to questions, is that what right view is that you understand and penetrate the Four Noble Truths. And by understanding the problem, the cause, the elimination, and the path forward, you're essentially accepting responsibility for your own feelings, your intentions, your speech, and your actions. You understand that all those things are decisions that your mind is making, and you can actually eradicate the discontentedness, but you need to be able to establish right view and see the truth of what's actually causing these feelings, and accepting responsibility for your feelings and your intentions, your speech and your actions is what's going to help you to be able to do that. Then you establish right intention. You start practicing this when you start seeing how helpful this is, that you practice the intention of renunciation where you're willing to let go. You practice non-ill will or goodwill, which is loving kindness. And you practice the intention or the thinking or the thought of harmlessness, where you're disinterested or incapable of causing harm. So I'm going to open up to questions that you guys have. You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom in the comment section, or you can raise your hand in Zoom, unmute your microphone, and ask any questions that you like. So it looks like Marcy has a question. Go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you, Teacher David. So establishing right view and accomplishment in right view, how would one know where they've gone from just establishing right view to having accomplishment in view?
Yeah, so we're studying volume 5 in the Polycanon English Study Group, and just this past week, yesterday, we went through all the discourses that help you to see how to establish accomplishment in view. Where establishing right view is understanding the Four Noble Truths and getting to the point where you're no longer blaming other people for the feelings that you experience, where you fully understand that it's your mind that's causing these feelings. That's getting established in right view. But having accomplishment in view is above and beyond that, and that's in volume 5. So I'm not sure, Marcy, if you were in class yesterday. If not, you can go back and watch the recording and you'll see all the discourses. They're in the section of chapters 21 through 30, which is where we studied those.
Okay. Thank you, Teacher David.
You're welcome. And then I've also done those in the retreat that I do in January about developing a life practice to attain the first stage of enlightenment. I do a class on that particular topic as well. Okay, Janae, you have a question?
So are the three universal truths a part of right view?
You can think of it that way. There's multiple things that are part of right view. Understanding like the natural law of karma is part of right view and things like this. But if you really boil it down, what right view is the Four Noble Truths. That's why the Buddha's pointing to that as part of the Eightfold Path. But in order to understand the Four Noble Truths, you would have to understand the three universal truths. So that kind of comes along with it. So by the Buddha pointing to the Four Noble Truths, there's the implied understanding that to establish right view, you need to understand the three universal truths as well. And you also need to understand the natural law of karma and things like this.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, I'm just going to look in Facebook and YouTube. Looks like Ted or Kristen has a question. Go ahead, guys.
Hey, David. It almost seems like the Four Noble Truths, that the fourth truth is out of order every time I read it, because 3, you're eliminating discontentedness, but then 4, you're back on the path to eliminating discontentedness. Or is it just a continuation to keep discontentedness at bay, I guess, is the question.
Yeah, the way that this is being explained is the second noble truth is explaining the cause, that it's craving, desire, attachment. And then the third noble truth is saying, hey, you can eliminate this discontentedness by eliminating craving, desire, attachment. And then the fourth noble truth is saying the way to eliminate craving, desire, attachment is the Eightfold Path. That's the path that's going to teach you how to eliminate your cravings, desires, attachments. So it's in sequential order. Yep, thumbs up. Okay, cool. All right, so now let's move into the moral conduct section of the Eightfold Path. And whenever we're talking about moral conduct, we're building it on top of this wisdom. We're understanding that it's our own mind that's causing these discontent feelings. Because when you're maybe bitter, harsh, and hostile with people, and you're thinking maybe that you're justified in that, that's because the mind doesn't have right view. If you're being bitter and harsh and hostile with the people around you, you might think that they deserve this anger. But that's because you don't have right view in that situation. So you're building your moral conduct on top of this foundation of understanding that it's your own feelings that are or your own mind that's causing these feelings, and you're building it on top of this right intention of letting go, of practicing this non-ill will or this loving kindness, and practicing based on this intention of harmlessness, where you're disinterested in causing harm to others. And you can cause harm through your moral conduct. So what the Buddha is teaching you in right speech, right action, and right livelihood is not rules and commandments. He's teaching you the natural law of karma. He's helping you to be able to see this cause and effect, or this action and result. Now, you might have heard this referred to as karma. This is the Sanskrit way of referring to this. The Sanskrit language uses the word karma. The Pali language uses the word karma. This is the original teachings of the Buddha in the Pali language. So people who study those will tend to use the word karma. Now, if this translated to just one English word, I would just use that because it'd be much easier for everybody to understand. But since it doesn't just translate to one English word, I still need to use it. So what this is referring to is this natural law of cause and effect, that when you make a certain decision, there's going to be a result or a consequence. And if you make decisions wisely, you'll experience wholesome results or wholesome karma. When you make decisions unwisely, you're going to experience unwholesome karma or unwholesome results. So it's this cause and effect, or this action and result. It's the results of your decisions, because it's your life, your decisions, and your results. The natural law of karma isn't anything mystical or magical. It's not punishments and rewards. There's no being who's overseeing this and deciding who gets what. It's not even about who's to blame or who's at fault. It's literally about just cause and effect, a sequence of events. And when we make certain decisions about our moral conduct, we're going to experience certain results because of it. So what the Buddha is teaching you in the Eightfold Path is he's teaching you the wholesome moral conduct, the wise moral conduct that's going to produce wholesome karma. And the beauty in this is that you don't believe it. You can learn it, you can reflect on it to verify it, and you can practice it. And you've been living in the world long enough that when you learn this and you start reflecting on it, you're like, oh yeah, when I did that, that did not turn out well at all. But oh yeah, when I did these things over here, yeah, it turned out really well. You can see that truth for yourself through learning and reflecting. And then as you start practicing this moral conduct, that's where you're going to see the beauty in this, because now you're going to know the wisdom of it, that as you're practicing this on a day-to-day basis, that the condition of your mind in your life is gradually improving. So this moral conduct, it isn't rules or commandments. He's teaching you the natural law of karma so that you can see the cause and effect. This first one here for the moral conduct section of right speech, I'm going to help you to understand it using the words of the Buddha. And while it's called right speech, and this is what you hear that people teach it, that's the only thing that was going on during the lifetime of the Buddha was speech. So you might think about this as right communication, because we actually communicate in many different ways, and you're going to need to practice all of this through all your communication, whether it's speech or text messages or emails or social media posts or all these other things. Because if you were, say, going to a job interview and you like knocked it out of the park and you were doing really well in your speech, but then they went and checked your social media and you were bitter and harsh and hostile in that social media, you're probably not going to get the job. So here, even though it's referred to as right speech, I encourage you to think about it as right communication, because you're going to need your voice messages, your text messages, your social media, all the things you do, even like emails, to be based in right speech. So here the Buddha says, in what, monks, is right speech or right communication? Refraining from lying, refraining from slander, refraining from harsh speech, refraining from frivolous speech. This is called right speech. So here, each one of these things is based in craving, desire, attachment. So by you improving your speech, you're actually going to be eliminating your craving, desire, attachment. So we can look at something like lying. We know that when the mind is lying, there's something that it wants. It has a longing, yearning. And if it tells the truth, it's not going to get what it wants. So it tends to lie, right? And because it's trying to get its craving fulfilled. But now people discover those lies, and it produces unwholesome results for us. We start to be considered to be unreliable, and we're not dependable in our relationships. People can't trust us any longer. So if you've done any kind of lying, and we all did as we were growing up, you can see that it produced unwholesome results for you. You don't have to believe this. You can see the truth for yourself, that it's wise to tell the truth. And then your mind can be calm and peaceful as you're just telling the truth in your day-to-day life. What slander and gossip is where you're trying to damage somebody's reputation. The mind has a craving there. It wants to look good in front of other people. And the mind thinks if I can diminish others, then it'll make me look better, right? So if you're slandering and gossiping people, this is coming from craving, desire, attachment. And if you've done any of this, you can see that it produces unwholesome results. You can see things in the news where people have gossiped and slandered someone and they end up murdered, right? So that's like the height of this. That's the unwholesome gamma as a result of having slandered or gossiped about somebody. But at the very least, if you're gossiping and slandering people, whoever you're talking to or you're gossiping and slandering, when your back's turned, they're going to be gossiping and slandering about you. It's only a matter of time, right? So you would like to eliminate that from your practice. It's kind of like you walk into a room and somebody has a candle and you have a candle, and the mind thinks, well, if I can put out their candle, my candle will shine brighter. But in reality, you'd like both candles to shine bright in the room because then we can see better. And then you'd like to refrain from harsh speech. This is paying attention to your tone, your tempo, and your word choice. Because when you have craving, desire, attachment in your mind and you want things to be a certain way, you'll find it really hard to speak gentle. You'll be harsh and bitter and hostile, almost trying to fear this other person into doing things your way, because the mind's trying to get its cravings fulfilled. But if you can start to learn how to speak with your tone, your tempo, and your word choice to be gentle, now you can set aside those cravings and be gentle in your speech. And you're going to see that you're going to have much better response from the people around you. When you're bitter, harsh, and hostile, people are only going to do those things as long as they fear you. When they stop fearing you, they're going to stop doing those things because they haven't learned the wisdom behind why it's wise to do those particular things. Then you would like to refrain from frivolous speech. What this is if you've ever done this, or if you've ever known anybody who's ever done this, this is where you're just going yada, 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 a yada, 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 a yada, yada, yada. You're just like, oh my goodness, when is this person going to stop talking? It's not even a conversation. It's like a broadcast, right? Where someone's broadcasting to you or you're broadcasting to them. There's an underlying craving there. The mind just wants to talk, right? And what you would like to be able to do is restrain the mind from that. So this is the top level of speech. And if you're challenged in any of these areas, you would like to work on those. The lying, the slander, the harsh speech, and frivolous speech. Start working on that to eliminate that from your practice. But then you would like to dive deeper into this and practice something called the 5 factors of well-spoken speech. This is a deeper level of speech that you would ultimately like to bring your practice up to. And this is going to produce significant results in your life, where you speak at the proper time, what you say is true, gentle, beneficial, and with a mind of loving kindness. What speaking at the proper time is making sure that you're not interrupting people, because you know that you don't like it when people interrupt you, so you're not interested in doing that to other people. It's also about paying attention to your mind and making sure it's the proper time for you to speak. Because when you're angry and you're frustrated and you're agitated, that's not the time that you're interested in having a conversation with someone. Because the only thing that's going to come out of your mouth is the anger and bitterness and hostility. Or if you're angry and you go over and start pounding on your keyboard and writing out an email, that's not the right time to be talking. It's not the proper time. So hit save on that email instead of hitting send. And then come back a few hours or a few days later and decide if you still like to send that email or not when your mind is calmed down. So it's speaking to ensure that you're not interrupting others, that your mind is prepared to speak, and making sure the other person's mind is prepared to speak. Because you might be perfectly calm, but the other person might be bitter and hostile and harsh. And you're not going to be able to have a successful conversation that way. So you'd like to be sure it's the proper time to speak. And then speaking the truth, that's covered in the top section to ensure that you're not lying. Speaking gently, that's also covered in the top section where you're eliminating harsh speech, paying attention to your tone, your tempo, and your word choice. Speaking beneficially is all about ensuring that you don't have frivolous speech and idle chatter, that you're clear and concise in the way that you speak. It's not necessarily about the topic, it's more about the method of how you speak, that you speak clear and concise and precise when you're talking with people. And then you can be more influential in your community. And then you would like to wrap all of this with a mind of loving kindness, where there's this genuine interest in seeing all beings be well. So you can take something like this and you can learn it, and then you can start reflecting on it. You can look at situations where your conversations haven't gone well, or maybe they've exploded and you've had difficulties and struggles in your relationships. And you can see you and or the other person wasn't practicing these 5 factors of well-spoken speech. You either weren't speaking at the proper time, you weren't speaking the truth, you weren't speaking gently, you weren't speaking beneficially, or you weren't speaking with a mind of loving kindness. And now if you missed one of these or multiple of these, the conversation didn't go very well. And you can see this and independently verify it for yourself to know that it's the truth. But then you can look at the other side of this too. You can look at situations where the conversation has gone well. And you can see that you and the other person were practicing these, and you weren't even necessarily aware of them. Because remember, this is the natural laws. They're affecting you whether you're aware of it or not. So when you and the other person were practicing all 5 factors, the conversation went really well. And even though in the past you weren't consciously practicing these, now that you're aware of them, you can actually actively practice them. You can have consciousness where you move to this higher consciousness and you're actively working to practice all of these 5 factors. But you're going to find it a struggle in relationships where you have craving, desire, attachment, like with your parents, with your siblings, with your life partner, your children, maybe your boss or your coworkers, people that are really close to you. You're going to have difficulty speaking this way because you're going to want to get in there and speak really harsh with them, right? And this is why you might think the problem is your family, when in reality, it's your own mind, right? You might say like, look at my friends. I can have such a great time with all my friends and my neighbors and everything, but my family, oh, that might be really hard for you. That's because you have attachment in those relationships. You have cravings, you have expectations and wants. So if you start speaking wisely like this, over a period of time, you'll establish what's called barami. What barami means, this is a Thai word, where it means the one who people listen to. In each village in Thailand, there's typically some elders that people know that they're really successful. And if you're having a problem, you can go talk to these people and you can get help. And when I say that they're successful, I don't mean financially successful. I mean they're successful in their relationships. And people know this. And they are the one who people listen to. People go to them and ask for help because they're very influential in the community. And those people establish barami by speaking with the 5 factors of well-spoken speech, and people just really respect them and they have appreciation and gratitude for them. And they know that they're successful in their relationships, so they go seek help from them. So if you're interested in being influential in your relationships, you would like to establish barami, where you're the one who people listen to. This doesn't happen in 1 week or 1 month or maybe even 1 year, but over a period of time where you're speaking with the 5 factors of well-spoken speech, more and more, your family, your coworkers, people around you, they're going to look to you because they know that you're not causing harm through your speech. Even though they don't know the 5 factors, they're going to be able to feel that and sense that from being around you. They can see that you're speaking very wisely. So in the book, Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment, I have a lot of details about speech, and you can read it inside and out because I go into it in a lot of detail because you can cause a lot of harm through your speech. And now as you're causing harm, this harm is just going to come back to you. So you would like to be polite, kind, friendly, and respectful in all your conversations, but you would like to tune in to those factors that the Buddha is teaching you in right speech, where you're not lying, you're not having slander, you're eliminating harsh speech and frivolous speech. But then dial it in even closer and ensure that you're speaking at the proper time. What you say is true, gentle, beneficial, and with a mind of loving kindness. And you've got the book to be able to help you to be able to see the details of this. And you can talk with me and I'll help you as well. Then we have right action. Here's the words of the Buddha. He says, in what, monks, is right action? Refraining from taking life, refraining from taking what is not given, refraining from sexual misconduct. This is called right action. What he's talking about here is 3 impactful things that you could do with your body that's going to cause harm to others, and then harm is going to come back to you. So if you're taking life, if you're stealing, if you're having sexual misconduct, this is harm that you're causing through your bodily actions that is then going to come back to you. And the Buddha's not giving you an exhaustive list here of all the things that you could do in order to harm through your bodily actions. He's giving you 3 major ones, and then you can figure out the rest. Notice that he doesn't say, don't walk up to someone and punch them in the face. Well, if you understand right action, you know that that's unwise, because that person's probably going to punch you back. They might pull a knife or a gun on you. Their friends or family might start attacking you. These are challenges and difficulties that you're going to experience because you are practicing wrong action. So here the Buddha is just giving you 3 really impactful ones that you need to really dial in. And you're going to learn more about these when we get to chapter 7. 2 weeks from now, we're going to study the 5 precepts. And this is where the Buddha really expands this. He's going to give you much more illuminating language. Here, he's just summarizing it, and he's pointing to these 3 aspects. But in the 5 precepts, you're going to see this expanded. And I like to give a heads up to people about things like sexual misconduct, because the Buddha isn't talking about same-gender relationships here. What he talks about in the 5 precepts is he talks about like having sex with minors. He talks about having sex without consent. He talks about having sex outside of existing relationships, because that's all going to cause harm. But you'll never see that he talks about same-gender relationships as being harmful, because it's 2 loyal, loving, consenting adults choosing to have sex, and they're not causing harm to anybody whatsoever. So this is how wise the Buddha was, that 2,500 years ago, he already understood this, where we have people today that don't understand this. More and more the world's starting to understand it. But there's plenty of people in the world who don't understand that there's no harm in people of the same gender choosing to have sex. So the Buddha was aware of this, that it was occurring, because he talks about it in his teachings. But he doesn't describe it as sexual misconduct because there's no harm that's being caused. The natural law of Gotama is helping you to see that when you cause harm, harm's going to come back to you. So here he's giving you these 3 impactful ones, and you're going to see more details on this when we get to the 5 precepts in chapter 7. But notice he doesn't say, like, don't walk down the aisle of an airplane and drag your suitcase and run over people's feet and bump into their knees, right? Because planes didn't even exist during his lifetime. But if you understand this particular step of the Eightfold Path, you understand that you're not interested in causing harm through your bodily actions. So there's plenty of things that you can look at. And the Buddha talks about things like substances that cause heedlessness, where that's a bodily action, that you're causing harm to this being who you are. There's things like gambling, where there's craving, desire, attachment there. There's plenty of actions that you could look at. So you're never going to see an exhaustive list. You're just going to see him pointing to major ones, and then you need to figure out all the rest. Then there's something called right livelihood. This is how you choose to sustain your life in the world, how you contribute to the world and acquire the resources that you need in order to sustain your life. So here the Buddha says, in what, monks, is right livelihood? Here, monks, the noble disciple, having given up wrong livelihood, keeps himself by right livelihood. So here we're just getting something very general and very broad, because the Eightfold Path is a core central teaching. And then he has other teachings that plug in to the Eightfold Path. So if you go look in his other teachings, you're going to see where he talks about right livelihood in more detail. There's 2 levels of purification that the Buddha talks about with your right livelihood. I'm going to teach you the first level of purification today. What he teaches you is that it would be unwise to have business and weapons, living beings, meat, substances that cause heedlessness, and poisons. So if you have a livelihood in any of those things, you're sustaining your life off of causing harm to other beings. And you can independently verify how by you causing harm to others, this harm is going to come back to you. So if I was to stand on the street corner and I was going to be selling substances like crystal methamphetamine or heroin, I'm causing harm in the community. And now there's people who are getting addicted to this substance. And now they're going out and they're robbing, they're stealing, they're doing things like this. Maybe they're having sexual misconduct in order to bring me money. And now standing on the street corner, I can get beat up, I can get robbed, I can get murdered, I can get addicted to these substances, I can even get arrested, right? And this is the harm that's coming to me as a result of causing harm to others. Well, this natural law of Gotama is functioning at a much higher level, Because in a lot of places, it's illegal to stand on the street corner and sell crystal methamphetamine or heroin. But there's some places where if you would like to work, say, at a liquor store selling alcohol, or you'd like to work at a bar, your government's not going to arrest you for that, right? Just like, yeah, go ahead, right? Well, the human laws, they're imperfect because they're created by human beings. But the natural law of Gama is functioning at all times, and you're able to see that it's the most unbiased teacher you'll ever find, because it's going to show you when you're making wise decisions and when you're making unwise decisions. So if you understood the natural law of Gama, you might not work at that bar or that liquor store, because you know that those are the places where people come in and get robbed, they get beat up, people get murdered in those situations. At the very least, you're dealing with intoxicated clientele day in and day out. So how could you get to a peaceful and joyful mind and a peaceful and joyful life if you're having to constantly deal with intoxicated people, right? So you could go through each one of these and independently verify them. There's things in the news right now where there's people who have had business and weapons and they've recently been assassinated or killed because that's the work that they're doing. So you can see the natural law of Gama in many different ways in many different situations, and you can independently verify this. So these are the 5 livelihoods that the Buddha is teaching you that it would be wise for you to avoid and not practice. Then he teaches you how to conduct your livelihood so that you can be successful in the work that you do. That he teaches you to eliminate scheming, flattery, hinting, belittling, and pursuing gain with gain. What scheming is like corruption. So if I was a politician, it's not one of those 5 livelihoods that's causing harm, right? If I was a mayor of a town or I was a lawmaker or something like this, I'm not causing any harm by doing that. But if I was corrupt and I was scheming, this is causing harm. So now maybe I'm 10 or 15 years into my career and people find out that I've been doing that, and now I have difficulties getting reelected, and now my career is, kind of deteriorated here, and I find it difficult to support myself. So you would like to eliminate any scheming or corruption from your livelihood. What flattery is where you're just trying to flatter people into buying things from you. This is where, like, if you've gone into a store and someone's like, oh, you look so beautiful in that shirt. That shirt is really beautiful on you. I have these perfect earrings that'll go with that shirt. Would you like to see them? Right? This is like just trying to flatter somebody in order to sell them something. And if you've ever been in that situation, you've probably been turned off by it. You're probably like, I'm really not interested in being in this store. You might even have turned around and walked out, right? So you're not interested in flattering people, giving insincere comments just to get them to purchase things from you. What hinting is where you're not clear and concise about whatever work that you're doing. Let's just say that all of us are on a project team and we need to go into our boss's office and we need to brief them on our project. We would like to be clear and concise and precise in the way that we're communicating to them. And this is going to produce the best results in our livelihood. The Buddha teaches you to eliminate belittling, where you're not belittling your coworkers, your business partners, even your competition. Sometimes people think that it's wise to belittle your competition and knock them down. But that's just harming you because your customers aren't going to like that. If you don't have anything good to say about your competition, then just don't say anything at all. If someone's asking you questions about your competition, then you just say, well, I'm not quite sure what they do, but this is what I do and this is what I can offer you, right? No need to knock them down and degrade them and diminish them. What pursuing gain with gain is, this is where you're just doing a particular job for the money. You don't care about the work, about the product or the service. You're just doing it for a paycheck. And if you've ever had that kind of job before, you might have been really happy at first because you got a certain amount of money and you really like that. But then after a few months, that's worn off and you feel like you're in a dead-end job where you might be like dragging yourself to work every single day and you just despise going to work. At first, maybe you really liked it because you're getting all this money, but that craving kind of burns out. And now you're left in this livelihood where you don't really enjoy it because you don't have enthusiasm and ambition and motivation in this livelihood. The Buddha is encouraging you to get to that point where you actually enjoy your work, right? This word work, it doesn't have to be a derogatory word. You can actually really enjoy what it is that you do, where you go to work for 6 hours, 8 hours, or however many hours, and you thoroughly enjoy your work, Whereas if you go to work 6 or 8 hours and you despise being there and you can't stand where you're at, then you're not going to have a very peaceful and joyful mind and a peaceful and joyful life. So you'd like to get to the point where you're not just taking a job for the money, but it's something that you actually enjoy, that you have enthusiasm and ambition about. So this is the first fold of purification, where you're eliminating any of those 5 livelihoods, and you're also not practicing any of these: the scheming, flattery, hinting, belittling, and pursuing gain with gain, where you're just chasing after money. And after you've done that, then there's deeper level teachings. If you're in between jobs or you're looking to move to a new job, you might take a look at volume 12, chapter 14 of our book series. That's where the Buddha has his extensive teachings on right livelihood. So it has these right here that I just talked about, but it has some additional teachings as well. And you have words from me to be able to help you as well. So volume 12, chapter 14 is where you'll find that. And that'll guide you in developing a livelihood that you feel more enthused and have ambition about. So that when you get out in the morning, you're just like, man, this is going to be an excellent day. I get to go to work. This is going to be so fun, right? So in terms of summarizing the moral conduct, we've talked about right speech or right communication, where you're not causing harm through your verbal conduct, but you're also looking at it in terms of your text messaging, your chat, your social media posts, your emails. All of this should be harmless, where you're communicating in a harmless way. And you need to be able to understand you're not going to be able to snap your fingers and go out and do this today. Even though you're learning it now, it's going to be gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress. You're not going to be able to just snap your fingers and instantly start practicing these things. And that's where the next section that I'm going to talk about is going to come in, the mental discipline section. You're going to need that in order to help you with your moral conduct. So don't put the pressure on yourself that just because you learned it today, that you should be able to go out and master it tomorrow. It's going to take you gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress. One of the biggest myths about the life story of the Buddha is people think he sat under a tree, he meditated, and he instantly got to enlightenment. This isn't actually true. He had to work his way through all of these factors and getting his practice up to a point where he was practicing things like right speech. So you're going to need to develop this as well. And you're going to need to develop right action, where you're not causing harm through your bodily actions, that all of that should be harmless. And then you work with your livelihood to ensure that you're sustaining your life in a way that doesn't cause harm to others. So this is the moral conduct section of the Eightfold Path. Right speech, right action, right livelihood, ensuring that you're not causing harm through your moral conduct. And the Buddha is giving you the guidance of how to do that so that you can then learn it, you can examine it and investigate it. You can reflect on it to verify it, because if you've ever done any of these things or you know people that have, you'll be able to see where it's caused harm and that there's been unwholesome results. And then you would like to practice it day to day, dial this in closer and closer into your practice. So let me know if you have questions here. Again, you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. Okay. So a person here on Facebook is saying, how can I speak with loving kindness with a person who harms me? So it's important to understand what harm is. Someone can cause you harm, but they can't cause you discontentedness. What harm is where you're being injured in terms of your physical body is being injured, your material possessions, or your reputation. So if somebody's harming your physical body or your material possessions or your reputation, there's no need to be angry and bitter and hostile and harsh with this person, because that's not going to solve the problem. You need to choose to move away from this situation and get away from this situation where you're no longer having a relationship with this person where they have the ability to cause any harm to you. But as long as you stay in a relationship with this person, then you're going to be able to have them continue to do these things. So it's best to move away. So you would like to arise this loving kindness where you have a genuine interest in seeing them be well. This is where you can disagree with their choices and decisions, but you can have loving kindness for them as a person, where you would like to see them be well, but you understand their wellness is from their decisions. It's not from your decisions. So you would like to be able to separate the choices and decisions that people are making from the person themselves. Okay. We have a question here from Amina. She says, thanks for the class today. Does part of letting go mean also including letting go of the expectations others have of us? Yes. If you're letting go of the craving, desires, wants, expectations that you have within your own mind, the last thing you're interested in doing is adopting somebody else's expectations within your own mind. Because now somebody puts their expectations on you, and now you've adopted that as your own, and now you chase after that. I learned this very early in life. I was about 17 years old, and I was spending a lot of time with my guy friends. And my family was like, why do you spend so much time with your guy friends? Why don't you go get a girlfriend? And, I thought about this for a while, and, they're putting this expectation on me to get a girlfriend. So I went and got a girlfriend, started spending time with her. And then a few months after that, they were like, why do you spend so much time with your girlfriend? Why don't you spend time with us? It was like the stick kept moving, right? It's like you can't make these people happy, right? Because they think if they can control you and put their expectations on you and they get what they want, they think that's going to lead to their happiness. Where in reality, you would like to understand, hey, that's their expectation. If you'd like to spend time with your guy friends, spend time with your guy friends. If you'd like to have a boyfriend or girlfriend, spend time with your boyfriend or girlfriend. I know you're married, so you're not going to have a boyfriend or girlfriend, but you know what I'm talking about, right? It's like, do what you would like to do. Don't allow other people's expectations of you to get in the way of you charting a course in life that's best for you. Other people are going to think that they know what's best for you, and they're going to start telling you what they think is best for you. But it's you that is making your decisions in your life, and it's important for you to be able to do that. Another question here from Nabil is, there are swamps in some countries that produce mosquitoes that cause disease and kill people. Don't you think that it's necessary to use poisons to kill these mosquitoes? There's things that we can do with things like mosquitoes that discourage them from coming around human beings. There's a certain oil that I've used when I was in America. It's called Skin So Soft. And you put this oil on you and the mosquitoes won't bite you because they won't go through that oil. So we don't need to kill other beings in order to stop them from doing some harm to us. Those beings, mosquitoes, they live for a very short period of time, and they're going to live whatever life they live. They have a certain purpose that they're fulfilling in the world, and they're coming into the world and experiencing that existence. But if we go around killing, that's coming from our own craving, that's coming from our own hatred and our own ill will. We can maintain our peace and joy by understanding that we're not causing harm to other beings. Because if you put out harm towards other beings, this is all going to come back to you. So the better way is to deter things like mosquitoes from coming towards you by using natural things like oils and things like this. This will deter them from actually coming to you. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions anywhere. So let's move into the mental discipline section of the Eightfold Path. This is where it's going to really come together for you. And you're going to see how all this works together. We're going to talk about right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. You wouldn't actually be able to practice the moral conduct section without the mental discipline section. So this mental discipline starts with right effort. The Buddha says, in what, monks, is right effort? Here, monks, a monk rouses his will, makes an effort, stirs up energy, exerts his mind, and strives to prevent the arising of unarisen, evil, unwholesome mental states. He rouses his will, makes an effort, stirs up energy, exerts his mind, and strives to overcome evil, unwholesome mental states that have arisen. He rouses his will, makes an effort, stirs up energy, exerts his mind, and strives to produce unarisen, wholesome mental states. He rouses his will, makes an effort, stirs up energy, exerts his mind, and strives to maintain wholesome mental states that have arisen, not to let them fade away, to bring them to greater growth, to the full perfection of development. This is called right effort. So there's 4 things that the Buddha is talking about here. And I've kind of boiled it down so you can see that really clearly. And I'm going to talk about examples here so you can understand how to apply right effort. So the first one that he's talking about is preventing unwholesome mental states that have not arisen from arising in the mind. So there's certain unwholesome mental states that are not currently in your mind. And what the Buddha is saying is you're going to need to apply the effort to prevent those from ever entering the mind. A good example of this is probably killing another human being. This is probably the farthest thing from your mind right now. You probably have no interest in doing that whatsoever. It's not in your mind. It's outside the mind. And the Buddha is saying you're going to need to prevent this from ever coming into your mind, because this and other unwholesome mental states that are not currently in your mind, if they come into your mind, you might act upon them. So you would like to apply the effort to prevent any unwholesome mental states from coming into the mind. And this is just one example. Then the second one is abandon unwholesome mental states that have arisen in the mind, because there are certain unwholesome mental states that are currently in your mind if you're unenlightened. And an example of that might be that if you're in an existing relationship and you have a craving for sexual contact outside of that relationship, you need to apply the effort to abandon that and eliminate that out of the mind, because you know it's going to cause harm, right? Because if you're in an existing relationship and you go outside this relationship, you're going to end up having difficulties and struggles because of that. There's a whole litany of things that are going to be a result of that unwise decision. So if you see that unwholesome mental state, you would like to abandon it, apply the effort to eliminate it out of the mind. Or if you notice anger or frustration or irritation, that's not going to be beneficial for you. So you would like to apply the effort to cut that off and eliminate it, because it's an unwholesome mental state that has arisen in the mind. And you're going to need to apply the effort to abandon it. But then there's certain wholesome qualities that you're going to need to cultivate in the mind. And these wholesome qualities, some of them aren't currently in your mind. You're going to need to apply the effort to bring those into your mind. So for example, you're going to learn about generosity and how this is really important on the path to enlightenment, that you're practicing the giving and sharing of more than is strictly required in any given situation without any expectation of anything in return. Well, if you find it that you're kind of selfish and maybe you're holding on to things really tightly and you find it difficult to give and share with others, you're going to need to apply the effort to bring this generosity into the mind, because that's what's going to help to train your mind to eliminate its cravings, desires, attachments, and holding on to things so tightly. It's going to train your mind to live open-handedly and let go and be joyful in giving and sharing. If you lack compassion, if there isn't compassion in your mind, compassion is where you have the concern for the misfortune of others. The opposite of this would be where you're indifferent, where you could care less about what happens to other people or other beings. If you know that you don't have compassion in your mind, you're going to need to apply the effort to cultivate this and bring it into the mind. And then the fourth one is you're going to need to maintain wholesome mental states that have arisen, not allowing them to fade away, and work to increase their growth in the mind. So there are certain wholesome qualities that are currently in your mind, but they haven't been brought to full growth and full perfection, full development in the mind. An example of that might be loving kindness. You probably have loving kindness in your mind. You probably have a genuine interest in seeing others be well, and you can be warm and gentle in certain situations. But then there's other situations where you're maybe bitter and harsh and hostile. And that's because your loving kindness hasn't been brought to full growth and full perfection and full development. So where you're seeing that, you're going to need to apply the effort to arise that loving kindness in the mind, where you can be loving and kind in all situations, because that bitterness and hostility isn't going to get you anywhere. And then there's something called sympathetic joy. Sympathetic joy is the joy for others' success, even if you didn't contribute to it. The opposite of this would be maybe envy or jealousy. So maybe you have sympathetic joy. Maybe when someone's like, hey, I'm going to go to Thailand on a trip. Maybe you're like, oh, that's wonderful. You're going to have a great time. I was there last year. Have an excellent time. The mango and sticky rice is outstanding. The food is great. Oh, the massages are amazing. Go have a good time. Enjoy yourself. And you feel this sympathetic joy for them. Joy for their success, even though you didn't contribute to it. But now you might be at work where you've applied for a promotion and a coworker has applied for a promotion and they get it instead of you. And now you're jealous. Now you're envious. This is because there hasn't been enough right effort to bring this wholesome quality of sympathetic joy to full growth and full perfection and full development. So you would like to apply the effort to do that. So you're going to learn about these healthy mental states of what's referred to as the Brahma Viharas. This is loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. And you're going to need to apply the effort to arise not only these wholesome qualities, but others as well. So the Buddha is teaching you to apply the effort to eliminate the unwholesome and bring in the wholesome. So the first one is you're preventing unwholesome mental states from arising. The second one is any unwholesome mental states that have arisen, you're eliminating them from the mind. The third one is any wholesome qualities that are not currently in the mind, you're going to apply the effort to bring those into the mind. And then any wholesome qualities that are currently in your mind, you would like to cultivate those, encourage those, don't allow them to fade away, bring them to full growth and full perfection. The wholesome and unwholesome qualities that are either in your mind or outside of your mind, that's going to be unique to you. These are just examples to help you understand what right effort is. So the way that you practice right effort is you combine that with right mindfulness. Without right mindfulness, you wouldn't be able to practice right effort. So again, I'll read this to you and then I'll teach it to you. The Buddha says, "In what, monks, is right mindfulness? Here, monks, a monk resides reflecting on body as body, dedicated, clearly aware and mindful, having put aside craving and worry for the world. He resides reflecting on feelings as feelings, dedicated, clearly aware and mindful, having put aside craving and worry for the world. He resides reflecting on mind as mind, dedicated, clearly aware and mindful, having put aside craving and worry for the world. He resides reflecting on mental objects as mental objects, dedicated, clearly aware and mindful, having put aside craving and worry for the world. This is called right mindfulness." So what the Buddha is teaching you here is the 4 foundations of mindfulness. But first, let's just talk generally about what mindfulness is. What right mindfulness is in general is awareness of mind. You would like to cultivate this awareness of mind because when you're aware of what's going on in the mind, you can take action to either eliminate the unwholesome or cultivate the wholesome. But if you weren't aware of what's going on in your own mind, you wouldn't be able to do that. So you're going to need to develop this awareness of mind. And this might be where you hang out for a few months. Because if you're like me, when I got on the path to enlightenment, I had no idea what was going on in my own mind. I was just plowing through the world, knocking down trees, burning up the forest, kind of smelled smoke. And I was like, where's that smoke coming from? Who lit the fire? And I look behind me and there's this whole forest that's been knocked down. And it was me that was doing it all along. And I'm the one lighting the fires. But I thought it was other people that was doing this, right? So you're going to need to build this awareness of mind where you're aware of what's going on in your own mind. And you're going to need to know that this word mindfulness has made its way into modern language. And people are oftentimes using this word in the way that the Buddha didn't use it. And whether other people use it in this way or not is up to them. However anyone chooses to use the word mindfulness, that's their choice. But if you would like to get in touch with what the Buddha taught on this word mindfulness, you're going to need to know what it means, which is awareness of mind. Because what some people say is they'll say, can you mindfully carry this glass of water to that table? What they're saying is, can you carefully carry this glass of water to the table, right? So what mindfulness means is not careful. What it means is awareness of the mind. But more specifically, what the Buddha is teaching you is to have awareness of the 4 foundations of mindfulness. This is the life cycle that your discontentedness is going to take. As your cravings, desires, attachments are getting triggered, you're going to notice these 4 things, and you're going to need to develop this. You might not have awareness of these things right now, but you will, through the next step of right concentration, be able to develop this, where you have awareness of the bodily sensations, the feelings, the condition of the mind, and the mental objects. That if you can think back to a time where you've been angry or frustrated or some other discontent feeling, there's bodily sensations that are occurring first. With something like anger, the bodily sensations are like tingling in the body, rising up towards the head, maybe tightening in the chest, tightening in the throat, maybe heat in the face or pressure in the skull. This is an early warning system that you have. It's alerting you that, hey, you're about to get angry. You're about to get frustrated. You're about to get irritated or annoyed. And you have an opportunity at that point to cut it off and let it go and not allow the mind to experience that conditioned feeling. You're not suppressing your feelings. You're actually cutting it off and letting it go before it actually becomes a feeling. So this bodily sensations is like an early warning system saying, I'm about to get a conditioned feeling. I'm about to get a conditioned feeling. I'm about to get a conditioned feeling. And you're able to say, nope, not going to let you do that. Not going to let you form your feelings based on that condition, that it's no longer sunny and you see it's raining and you're starting to experience these bodily sensations. Nope, not going to let you do that. Or any other thing, because you're going to experience contact through the eyes, the ears, the nose, the tongue, the body, and the mind itself. And if it triggers one of these cravings, you're going to see that contact as agreeable, or you're going to see it as disagreeable. And if you see it as agreeable, you're going to get a conditioned, pleasant feeling. Or if you see it as disagreeable, you're going to get a conditioned, painful feeling, or neither painful nor pleasant. So the bodily sensations are that early warning system to allow you to cut it off and let it go. Because if you don't do it there, then it's going to become a feeling. Now the mind's angry. Now the mind's frustrated. And you've got to get rid of it. And it's a real problem to deal with. It's kind of like if you were going to take a boat from New York to London and you're out in the middle of the sea and this water comes flooding into your boat, you've got a real problem to deal with. You got to get this water out of the boat. But if you can prevent this water from ever coming into the boat, you can just sail your way from the USA to the UK, right? So it's the same thing, that if you cut off and let go of these feelings that are arising as a bodily sensation, you can preserve your mind so that it never experiences anger and frustration. And if you do that enough, eventually you won't even have any arising of these discontent feelings because you've eliminated the causes and conditions that are producing them. So throughout your day, if you can be aware of the bodily sensations and you can cut it off and let it go, this is going to preserve your mind. Because if it becomes a feeling, now you can cut it off and let it go there too. And that would be the next best option, is cut it off there. But if you don't cut it off as a feeling, now it's been a few hours, it's been a few days, and this is where it's affecting the condition of your mind. If you've ever been grumpy or irritable or agitated for multiple hours or weeks, this is because you didn't cut it off as a bodily sensation. You didn't even know that that was maybe occurring. You didn't cut it off as a feeling. And now it's affected the condition of your mind. And now you're grumpy and irritable throughout your day. And now you're causing all kinds of unwise decisions because you're maybe being grumpy and irritable to people that that you're around. And now it's causing all kinds of difficulties in your life. And then what happens is it forms a mental object. This is a deeply rooted container in the mind. And in this example, it's ill will, where right now you don't have any anger or frustration in your mind, perhaps. And in the mind, there's something called a mental object of ill will, that it's this deeply rooted container, that if somebody triggers one of your cravings, desires, attachments, this ill will is going to arise, where now you're being bitter and harsh and hostile towards people. So if you can put a blockade at the bodily sensations and cutting off and letting go there, then you can purify the mind of these mental objects, which are the 10 fetters, those 10 pollutions. You can uproot those and eliminate them out of the mind. But if you keep allowing this process to go, this life cycle, then you're just going to keep feeding these mental objects, and they're going to get more and more profound and more deep and more rooted in the mind. So the way that this looks in a day-to-day life is, let's just say that you're on the sofa and you turned on the TV and you're starting to watch the news. And now when you're watching the news, you're experiencing contact through the eyes and the ears, and you're hearing something that you disagree with, and you're starting to notice the frustration, and you're noticing the bodily sensations, the tingling, the tightening of the chest, tightening of the throat, the heat in the face, or the pressure in the skull. Turn off the news, get up and go for a walk, go for a bike ride, go to the bathroom and wash your hands, go to the kitchen and get a glass of water. Don't just allow the mind to sit there and dwell in this. So if you have right mindfulness where you're aware of these things, then you can apply right effort to cut it off and let it go. You can redirect the mind to something else, right? This is the way that you would like to do it. So that's a practical way that you can cut off and let go of these bodily sensations. More and more, you'll be able to do it internally within the mind, but early in practice, you're going to need to maybe potentially physically move the body and move the mind out of that environment and take it in another direction. So these are the 4 foundations of mindfulness: having awareness of the bodily sensations, the feelings, the condition of the mind, and the mental objects. And this is going to take you time to build this up. But this is the real key to getting to the point where you're no longer experiencing those discontent feelings, is catching it as a bodily sensation. Then there's right concentration. This is the last factor on the Eightfold Path. I don't usually read this here in this particular class because what the Buddha is explaining to you is the results of having put together all the Eightfold Path. He's describing the jhanas. These are enhanced qualities of mind that you will experience as a result of having put together the Eightfold Path. I teach these in other classes where you can learn about the jhanas. So he's talking about the results of having put together the Eightfold Path. But where he talks about how to practice right concentration, he discusses this in other teachings. And that's what I'm going to focus on, is how to actually practice right concentration. There's two aspects to it. There's developing a daily meditation practice, and there's practicing singleness of mind in day-to-day life. The practice of daily meditation, you would like to build up a breathing mindfulness meditation practice to start out with, where you're having 2 or 3 meditation sessions for 30 minutes or more. And this might take you 6 months, a year, even 2 years to build up to that. But gradually take your time. You're not in a competition or a race with anybody. You're in your own journey. So gradually build up your practice. There's probably unbeneficial things that you're doing right now that you could clear out of your life, and you would have more time to be able to do things like meditation. So maybe for 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, you would like to be building up your breathing mindfulness meditation practice where you're focused on the breath. And when the mind moves off the breath, you cut that off and let it go, and you bring your mind back to the breath. The goal of this meditation isn't to eliminate your thoughts. The goal of this meditation is to notice sooner and sooner with your mindfulness, your awareness of mind, that your mind is moved off the breath. And then let that go and bring the mind back to the breath. So even an enlightened being is going to have thoughts and things that come through their mind, but they're going to notice it really soon, and they're going to cut it off and let it go and bring their mind back to the breath. So this is going to train your mind to let go. So you don't have that craving, desire, attachment that the mind's holding on to. So you're cultivating mindfulness and concentration, and you're training your mind to let go. And then your loving kindness meditation is going to help you to eliminate anger, hatred, and ill will by cultivating this genuine interest in seeing all beings be well. You're essentially rewiring your mind to be loving and kind so that now you can go out into the world and your relationships and be loving and kind with the people around you. Whereas if you're bitter and harsh and hostile, this is going to weigh down on your relationships. So the first aspect of right concentration is developing this meditation practice. Then you would like to practice what's called singleness of mind. What this is doing just one thing at a time. Whereas if you've been taught multitasking, your mind actually can't multitask. You can't do multiple things at one time. What you might be doing is you're doing like 3 seconds, 5 seconds of one particular task, and then you're rapidly cycling to another task for 5 seconds or 8 seconds. And then you're rapidly cycling to another one. You're just going around and around and around. It's kind of like a racehorse. And if you're doing this all day long where you're running around and around and around, when you get home after work, you find it very difficult to relax, where your mind is stressed and you're having anxiety, right? Because a racehorse, when they come off the racetrack, they're in the barn all hyped up because they can't calm down because they've been running around the track constantly, right? And that's what your mind's doing. So what you would like to be able to do is just do one thing at a time. Whereas if you're washing the dishes and your mind wanders, you would like to cut that off, apply right effort, right? So it's your right mindfulness that's going to make you aware that the mind is moved off the dishes, and then it's your applying right effort to cut that off and let it go and bring the mind back to your daily task, which is going to cultivate right concentration. Or say you're in a business meeting and you see your mind moves where you're just thinking and daydreaming about some vacation that you're going to have in 3 months' time, where you would like to cut that off and let it go and bring the mind back to the business meeting so that you can perform professionally in that business meeting. Whereas if you just allow the mind to be undisciplined and it runs around on you, you're never going to get to the point where you have concentration. So the way you might think about this is if you had a piece of wood and you had a steel rod and you grinded this steel rod back and forth, when you first start doing this, the steel rod's going to bounce around a lot because there's no groove there yet. But as you grind this steel rod back and forth, you're going to start getting a groove. And now when it pops out, you're going to know that, and you're going to be able to bring it back and now keep grinding back and forth. Well, eventually you're going to get a deep enough groove here where it won't ever pop out because you've got a really deep groove. You've been practicing right concentration. So in your day-to-day life right now, your mind might be bouncing around a lot. You might be talking on the phone, watching TV, eating a sandwich, doing all these things. And now when you get off the phone, you don't even know what you talked about. And you have to call this person up and say, can you remind me what I promised you that I was going to do? Or I apologize for talking to you that way. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to do that, right? Where you would like to just focus. If you need to talk for 10, 15, 20 minutes, then have that conversation and be done with it, rather than allowing it to be 45 minutes or an hour, and now you got to go back and clean it up. And your mind is in delusion. It has this lack of wisdom where it thinks it's actually accomplishing more. By talking on the phone, watching TV, and eating a sandwich, it's like, wow, look at me, I'm so productive. No, you're not, because this conversation is lasting longer, and you have to go back and clean it up because you weren't able to bring forth your wisdom of right concentration. So you'd like to just do one thing at a time, practicing singleness of mind. And wherever you see the mind isn't willing to do that, cut that off, let it go, and bring your mind back to the task at hand. So if you're sitting there eating, and you're watching a YouTube video as well, you might be trying to get rid of your boredom that way. But the reason why your mind is bored is because of its craving. It's craving this stimulation. And this YouTube isn't going to fix that. So you need to get rid of that and just focus on eating and train your mind to be peaceful and joyful, just focused on eating. And now this is what's going to help to train your mind to be peaceful and joyful in all situations. So you're going to need to practice this singleness of mind, where you're just doing one thing at a time. Okay, so now just to summarize that for you guys, what right effort is where you're taking initiative to eliminate unwholesome aspects of the mind and cultivate certain wholesome qualities. Where you're practicing right mindfulness, where you have awareness of the mind, that general awareness, and you're more and more developing the 4 foundations of mindfulness. And that's going to take you time to develop the awareness of the bodily sensations, awareness of the feelings, awareness of the condition of the mind, and the mental objects. That's going to come with time as you train in meditation. Then you'd like to develop right concentration, where you're practicing meditation and developing singleness of mind, where you're just doing one thing at a time. And more, you're going to start experiencing the jhanas, which are these enhanced qualities of mind, where your mind is absorbed a certain amount of meditation and is absorbed a certain amount of the teachings. And now your mind's going to be focused and clear all the time. But it's going to take you months and even years to get to this point. It's not a race, right? It's going to take you time to gradually build up your practice. But this is a permanent solution. The teachings of the Buddha lead exactly where he said they do. These 8 individual factors, if you dial them in closer and closer, you'll see incremental improvement over the course of your life, where the condition of your mind in your life is improving. So it's not like you do all this work and 5 years or 10 years from now, there's a light switch that switches and boom, you're automatically experiencing certain qualities. That's not the way it works. I've had some students in short as 2 days that have been studying with me in a retreat or in a course come in on the 3rd day and talk about how much improvement that they had just from the previous 2 days of training their mind. So you'll see incremental improvement as you're making your way on this journey, because you're gradually training the mind and honing it. But you're going to need to dial in each one of these and learn them closer and closer, and commit the Eightfold Path to your memory, where you understand it inside and out, backwards and forwards. And where you need help, there's videos, there's podcasts, there's books, there's audiobooks. You can schedule personal guidance with me. You can ask questions in classes. You can get help that you need. You can ask questions in our Facebook group and things like this. You can even send me private messages. So what I'm going to do with the rest of our time is just see what questions you guys have. You can ask any and all questions that you like by putting that into Facebook, YouTube, or in Zoom. Looks like Janae has a question. Go ahead, ma'am.
So with right mindfulness and the 4 foundations of mindfulness, those are like basically essential for eliminating the 10 fetters?
Yes. You wouldn't be able to get to enlightenment without any one of these factors. But in terms of right mindfulness, that's like a real key. there's no secret on the path to enlightenment. But if there's one thing that it's like, hey, you really need to clue into this, and this is really what's going to propel you to enlightenment, it's right mindfulness. Without that, you wouldn't be able to make real progress to get to enlightenment, because you're going to need to have awareness of those things, and you're essentially getting ahead of the curve. Instead of allowing the mind to keep being wired that way, to keep experiencing the conditioned feelings, you're getting way ahead of it where you're cutting it off as a bodily sensation. But it takes quite a while to build up your awareness of mind to be able to notice the bodily sensations and then cut them off and let them go each time. But once you get to that point, enlightenment is very close. It's within the next 1 to 3 years. You're going to be experiencing enlightenment.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Looks like Amina has a question here on Facebook. She says, what are some of the methods you have used, dear teacher, in the past to cut off bodily sensations, stopping them from becoming feelings? I try to take deep breaths, distract the mind with a task, or go for walks, but these tactics do not always work, and interested in hearing your guidance. The reason why they're not always working is because the mind is just not fully trained yet. You need to accumulate more and more benefits, that if you're dedicating time to meditation, where you're doing 2 or 3 for 30 minutes or more, right? 2 or 3 times a day, that's going to gradually train your mind. And it just takes an accumulation of doing that over multiple months and years to be able to get to the point where it will let go. And then the things that you're talking about is exactly what you would like to be doing, Amina, is taking deep breaths and focusing on the breath, distracting the mind, going to do another task. These are all things that you would like to do, but just understand that your mind is unruly. It's kind of like a 2-year-old child throwing a temper tantrum, and it doesn't want to listen to you, right? Because it's like that wild animal in the forest, and here comes the animal trainer trying to train us. No way, I'm not interested in that. So your mind's going to try to run away from you. So it's normal that what you're experiencing is that sometimes it's working, sometimes it's not, but just keep doing these things. And you'll see that more and more as you accumulate the benefits, this will ultimately is what was going to lead to your improvement of the mind and getting closer and closer to enlightenment. So just continue with those things and accumulate more and more of the benefits. Looks like maybe Janae has another question. Did you have another question, Janae?
No, I did not. I just forgot to put it down.
Oh, okay. No worries. Looks like Ted and or Kristen has a question. Go ahead, guys.
David, I got to say, it's more of a statement, I think. This is only chapter 5. And what we've gone over right now, the Eightfold Path, is like, oh my God, I have a lot of work to do. And then I project chapter 5 of only the first volume. And how many volumes are there? What, 13? Or it's going to be a journey, I guess, is how I have to look at it and not get overwhelmed, you know?
Yeah, when you're standing at the bottom of the mountain and you're looking up at the top, it's like, oh my gosh, this is such a tall mountain. I'm never going to climb this thing. But if you just focus on one step at a time and putting one foot in front of the other, next thing you know, you're halfway up the mountain, right? So today, what are you focusing on today? Maybe you need to do meditation. Maybe you need to attend this class. Maybe you need to read the book, right? You just do one step at a time and don't look at the big thing of top of the mountain, because the great thing about climbing this mountain is once you get to the top, you get to stay there and enjoy the view for the rest of your life. It's a permanent mental state. But just take your time along the way and see it as fun and enjoyable, and doing this inner growth and this inner work is just going to take time. So enjoy it and have fun. All right. So let me see if we have any other questions anywhere. Just going to kind of look around. Nice to see all of you guys in class today. Just seeing a lot of comments everywhere. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions anywhere. So what I'm going to do then is just end class by thanking all of you guys for joining. Thank you for being interested in learning the path to enlightenment and what the Buddha taught, because it's the very best thing that you could ever do for yourself, for those close to you, and all of humanity, because your mind's going to be improving, your life's going to be improving. You're going to be causing less and less harm to the people around you. So it's helping all the people around you. and it's helping all of humanity become a more loving and kind and gentle place to be. So I really admire people who learn and practice the teachings of the Buddha, because you're deciding that you'd like to do this inner work. And while it is challenging, you've got help here for you, right? Because I had to do all these kinds of things too. And I had struggles and difficulties along the way. And that's why it's helpful to study with a dedicated practitioner and a dedicated teacher, because that person would have done that same work that you're involved in, and they will help you to understand how they did it. Because yeah, when I looked at it, Ted, it looked like, wow, this huge mountain. And I just focused on one step at a time, and that's what worked. And now I gradually made my way along the path, right? So that's what you'd like to do. So as you guys are working the path, feel free to reach out through asking questions in the classes, through posting in our Facebook group, sending private messages, or scheduling personal guidance, and I'm here to help you guys. Next week, we're going to be studying a chapter that's very short and very simple, because now that we've had kind of 3 really meaty chapters, chapter 3, 4, and 5 are really meaty. Chapter 6 is titled The Middle Way, Walking the Middle Way. This is a really short chapter to read. It's a really short chapter for me to teach. I'll probably teach it in about 15 or 20 minutes, and then I'll open up to questions you guys have. It's a really simple teaching, but when you understand it and you apply it, it's very profound. So I'm going to teach that to you next week as part of our group learning program, chapter 6. So you guys are welcome to get this book by downloading it or printing it, getting printed versions on Amazon, or getting it at the temple by just reimbursing us for our printing costs. And you guys can be reading along. And then on Wednesday, I'm going to be in the second part of our 4-part series where I'm teaching Buddhist chanting to students. So you guys are welcome to attend that either live or watch through the recording. So thank you all for your questions and your interest to learn, and perhaps I'll see you guys in a future class. Have a very lovely and wonderful rest of your day. Take care. Sawadee-ka. Thank you again for watching. Enjoy your meditation. Look forward to seeing you online and answering any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.